And we're live. Hi, and welcome to Gay Out the City. I'm your host, Prince Electro Diamond, and today I am here with OnlyFans content creator, Just My Fans content creator, go-go dancer, and Instagram model, Tanner Vonn. How you doing today, sexy?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
And you're welcome, of course. I have to say this. I'm so glad. One of only two of Gio's boys who actually showed up. So,
who was the other one?
Damien.
Okay. I love Damien. I'm curious to know like who else was scheduled and didn't show up, but I guess that's a conversation we can maybe have later. But I'm not surprised by that comment either.
That's why it's like, I'll say this. Actually, crazily enough, I've never been to like see any of you. I actually live in South Florida. So like,
okay.
Yeah, I'm about an hour north of West Palm Beach. So like,
I'm newer to Florida. I just moved in January. So I feel like I'm still trying to myself because like everyone down here from Florida knows Florida so well and is so Florida centric. And they always give me all of these like road names and city names. And I'm like, I still have no idea exactly what you're talking about. So I always have like Google Maps like opened and I'm like, totally, like right down whatever boulevard. But they're all slowly starting to come together.
Yeah, because it's like, especially with you like not being from Florida, because like I've lived in Florida my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Can't wait to leave. But it's like every street in Florida looks the same. Like you can't even tell people a name because it's like you don't even know if you're on the right street because like every fucking street looks the same.
No, it's so fascinating. Like everyone from Florida, like it's so weird because they always shit talk Florida and say how much they despise it. Yet at the same time, they're either like not willing to actually do anything to move themselves out of Florida, or they just like, they're like, oh, I've just lived here my whole life, so I've never changed it. And it's this weird, like you hate Florida, but you also love Florida because you're still here for whatever reason. So it's this funny thing to observe from like an outsider kind of just being new here. It's like, you hate Florida, but you also love it enough to still be here to some extent.
I don't have enough. Well, okay. I need to... Because, of course, like every drag queen, I have a spending problem. So, like, I have to fix my credit before I leave.
Sure. No, like most of the reasons why people like have stayed is it's just it is like financial or whatever. But some people are just, oh, I hate it here, but then they like never even travel. They never even go on like vacations. Like, I met someone the other week who like is like 32, around my age, and has literally not even left the state of Florida in like 10 years. And I'm just like, how do you like? It just blows my mind how it's this strange bubble of the country that people like love and hate, but also, like I said, it's like it's the only place that exists to them in the US.
No, see, I used to, crazily enough, there was like a time, I think I still may move there, but there was a time, so I've lived in this, as I said, I live in South Florida now. I've lived in Orlando twice.
Okay.
So it's like, there was a time between the first and second time I moved to Orlando that I thought I was going to move to Atlanta.
I like Atlanta.
So, yeah, I do like Atlanta. Atlanta's so beautiful already. But it's like, I used to do that. I used to drive. At one point, I was driving like every other week for like 2 months back and forth from here to Atlanta because I was like trying to find a job and like.
That's a far. How long of a drive is that? Because the flight's like an hour and 20 minutes, hour and 15 minutes.
That's from here. It's 12 hours.
That's a hike. I mean, that's a long time to be anywhere, but in a car, like driving back and forth, 12 hours does not go by quickly.
No, and it's like, that's why I used to be able to do it. And like now I drive 2 hours to Orlando and I'm like, I need a nap. Like,
well, yep. Also, like you just said, like driving in Florida, whether it be especially highway, but also just anywhere, like all starts to look the same. So when you're driving from Orlando to like Miami or Fort Lauderdale, it's like, it's so long because the highway just looks so boring and redundant and it's terrible.
Yeah. So where are you originally from?
Yeah, so I'm originally from the suburbs of Philadelphia. So like I said, I just moved down from Florida to Florida in January. And I've always been kind of hopping up and down the upper East Coast states. Like I grew up around Philly, like I said, 40 minutes out. Lived in DC for a long time, but my family still lives in Philly suburbs, and I grew up there until I went to college. So I was there from birth to like 18 or so. Suburbia, kind of like typical like white picket fence, boring strip market, all of your, chain eateries and all of that, but just suburbia around Philadelphia.
See, that's the thing. It's like I've never met somebody who's like, I've lived in a city my whole life. I would have been like,
no,
I'm waiting for that. Like,
no, it fascinates me. Like, I mean, I think it would be really cool being like, oh, I grew up in New York City, for example, when you were like 4, but I can't imagine going to like grade school and just being brought up living in the middle of, like I said, New York or a big city. But I haven't met many people either that have had that city life their entire existence.
And also it's like, I feel like at that point, like, you don't have to watch your language around kids from New York, because it's like they've been on the subway like the whole time. So it's like, you can say fucking shit in front of them and nobody has a problem. But it's like, you go to the suburbs and that's why I sometimes, like, for like Thanksgiving, I like have like a friend's family that like I go over to Thanksgiving with, and I like usually am very, very quiet because I'm like, I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Yeah,
I don't want to say the wrong thing in front of your kids.
Yeah, I mean, granted, my mom is still, I mean, that's a whole other story, but my mom is like relatively religious, and growing up, like we weren't even allowed to say like crap. Like that was considered to be a curse word. So even when I go home today, like my mom's gotten better now that me and my brother are both like adults, but even if I say like crap or something even like relatively suggestive, she'll still like make a little bit of like a face, or like, that you're just saying something wrong. But you're right, like I feel like if you live in the city, that's wouldn't even get a second look, because that's just what you hear walking down the street on a regular basis.
Exactly.
So
what was it like for you growing up as a kid?
I mean, kind of like I briefly said, I mean, my mom was really religious just because she was raised that way. My dad is Jewish, but never really like celebrated like Judaism. So like he just kind of let my mom do all of like the religious raising, and I feel like most of the rules, so to speak. So I was actually kind of like sheltered as a kid and kind of held to this like standard of being forced like what the right thing to do was, when a lot of my parents or a lot of my friends had a little more of like a lax, I feel like, upbringing, and they were allowed to do more. But I think that led me, I'm the kind of person who, like, when I'm told no, it kind of makes me want to do the opposite thing and rebel. So
of course,
I followed my mom's rules. I wasn't like the kind of person who would like do shit just to be rebellious and test the waters. But I think it definitely made me, like, as I get older, want to do the opposite and like explore as much as I could and do as much as I could. So like I said, I had a pretty, like, I would say sheltered upbringing, but nothing like crazy or shocking. I just like did my best to like follow like what my mom like wanted until I was old enough to have that awareness of like who I was, and that, decide what wasn't for me or what was for me. But I always grew up with that like idea of like this was what life was supposed to be, like going to youth group, like going to church every Sunday, even though even at that age I was like, this is all not for me, like this is not really what I believe. And then once like college happened, I obviously kind of turned the opposite way, like I said, but overall, like nothing like crazy. My upbringing, it was just very typical suburbia, and just followed my parents' rules and did like dabbled in theater and like did all of the typical like gay kid things at the time without coming out and saying you're gay. But yeah, I mean, it's no complaints. Like there's nothing like super like traumatic or anything that happened to me, I don't think, growing up that like made me who I was, but it was just kind of, like I said, following like my parents' rules and kind of trying to enjoy life the best I could where I was, until I was old enough to have the realization to figure myself out and travel more and discover who I was as a person.
Yeah. See, I was sheltered, but I'd say like sheltered light. So I also had like a religious upbringing. I was raised Catholic. So like all of that. But I say like religious light because like my mom also introduced me to like Madonna, but it wasn't like the like sexual like erotica Madonna. It was more like Ray of Light, and like that was my introduction. And like I'd say starting around like middle school is when I started to like do stuff where it's like I kind of broke the rules a little bit because like
yeah,
my mom like my mom had like a stereo out in like the family room where she's like, don't ever use my stereo. And then when in the mornings when she would like leave the house, I would just like crank it up and play music really loud.
Yeah, like it's funny because my mom was like, I mean, my parents have definitely the kind of parents where I never want to say my dad, I don't want to speak for him, where he like settled by marrying my mom, and I hope he never watches this. But like he's just the kind of person who like he fell in love when they fell in love. And like I think as he like grew in his marriage, he realized like he's just the kind of person who's kind of just stagnant, is like, I'm not gonna like fight for no reason. He's kind of goes with the flow. So that's when I said my mom did most of like the raising of us as we got older. She's like, I'm just gonna let like your mom, like, you know, to do what she says. Like, I'm not gonna step in and like interject. I'm gonna let you do. He was just very blasé and chill. But like he would always step in. Like if I was like really pissing my mom off, he'd be the kind of person to be like, okay, can you just like please like listen to your mom? Like I don't want to have to be the one to like intervene in this. I don't want to have to like raise my voice. It was kind of just like my mom set the rules, and he was there as like, he was very supportive and loving, and he's like, one to have my back if anything went wrong. But he's just a very like cool, collected, like doesn't give a shit type of dad. So like, so I say my mom did most of like the parental stuff, and he was kind of just there to go along with the flow and step in if he needed to be.
Well, okay. Question: was your dad like older?
No, they're 3 years apart. I mean, both my parents are relatively young. I think they're like still in their they're in their like late 50s, and I'm 32. So they had me when they were young, in their early 20s. Like they met in college. And both my parents have like older and younger siblings. So I think my mom just kind of knew what she wanted. She knew she wanted kids. And my dad obviously wanted kids too, but she realized early on like not to fuck with my mom, and she was going to get her way anyway. So he was just there in the background.
Well, it was the same for me. I asked that because like I have like an older dad. Well, actually, I have older parents, I'd say, period. Like, well, we'll get to that in a minute. But it's like my dad's I'm younger than you. Like I'm 29, and my dad's like gonna be, or my dad just turned 73. So I mean, like,
wow,
yeah. So like, yeah, I have older. Yeah,
that's old. I mean, I don't want to say that's old. That's very judgmental because it doesn't matter. But that's still older to have a child, like to start parenting.
Yeah,
like that's early 50s.
Yeah, that's why like my sister used to get like upset every time I'd call my dad old. I'm like, because I'm like he is old, because my dad was like 53 when I was 10. So I mean, like,
yeah, like
that's old.
Some grandparents would be like starting to be kids like at the same age. Yeah, that's interesting.
And that's why I used to make all the old jokes, and my sister used to get mad. I'm like,
yeah, I mean, it's all relative and like subjective, but yeah, like most people, like, and especially growing up, like where I did, like I said, in like typical suburbia, like most of our parents were around like the same age, like 25, 30 years older than we were.
Right. So so what was it like for you coming out?
So that happened a little bit later for me. Like I knew at like a younger age, like I feel like most gay people do or did.
Right.
I would say I started like actually noticing it when I was in like early middle school, when I just started finding like the physical idea of a man to be more attractive than females. But especially, like I said, it wasn't even so much the fact that my mom was religious that made me hesitant to come out. It was just, I knew it would be a problem, but also the area that I grew up in, it was still very much the type of person where like people would use gay, even as that age, as like a slur or like a comment. And I just didn't have friends who were gay. It wasn't really a thing in my area. So I just started to kind of just like keep those ideas to myself. And I knew I had those questions, but it was never something I was comfortable enough to say. So I went that way through high school. Obviously, people could kind of tell that I was different just by the way that I talked or whatever my, ways that I like displayed myself. But I still would always be like, no, I'm not gay. Like, ew, like, ew. Like, you know what I mean? Like, no, fuck you. But I even like did things that looking back on were objectively gay. Like I did all the musicals. Like my parents tried to push me to do sports, and I never wanted to do those things. But it sucked because the older you get, and like you have that mentality of trying to like closet yourself or like keep a part of who you are secluded. It's like harder for you to like live that way because you know you're like living this lie. So like even into like my early years of college, I don't think, looking back on it, I always like try to think of the exact moment that I came out, but it wasn't until I actually graduated college in 2013 that I openly told people I was gay. So even throughout college, I like told most people that I was straight. And then I think my senior year in college was when, like I said, I didn't even come out yet, but I started, I think, like at like parties, there'd be like sometimes I like made out with a guy, or like I explored physical elements of being gay, but it was never really shared. But then once I graduated officially in May of like 2013, it was kind of like, fuck this. Like, I'm not getting any younger. I'm 21 now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I live wherever I want. I don't have to deal with the judgment of my parents as harshly. And I finally like had my first boyfriend, which is another like story how that happened. But once I started dating him, I told some friends first. Like, I remember calling my best friend on the phone and telling her, and like she was very supportive. And it was like very much like, I know, but no one wants the friend like to be like, yeah, I knew you were gay this whole time, but I didn't want to say anything.
Yeah.
Very supportive. Like every friend who I slowly started telling from there on, it got like easier and easier to tell them. And then I remember like 6 months later, once I was like dating, like I said, my first boyfriend at the time, I remember like finally mustering up the courage to tell my mom, and I called her first. And at first she like didn't believe it and cried, and it was a whole big debacle. And she asked like how I knew and like why I was choosing now to tell her. And eventually, like we didn't talk for like, it was maybe a couple days or like a week at most, but she like didn't realize that it wasn't a big deal. Then she told my dad, and like I told you before, my dad said, give a shit about anything. And he's like, he's just like, oh, your mom told me, like, you okay? Like, do you want to talk about it? And I was like, no, not really. And he's like, okay, great. Like, me neither. But then, so like that was fine. Like all my friends are mostly fine. But then, like, again, my mom, since she was so religious, obviously her parents were religious. And I think that was kind of a big thing, was not knowing if it was appropriate to tell my grandparents. But once you start coming out to that level and finally accepting who you are, you don't want to feel like you still have to live this like half closeted life to like your grandparents or other people. So it became a thing where like my mom kind of decided over time, like, that we agreed like it's fine that I was this way, and like she accepted me, but she at least wanted to wait until she knew how to tell like my grandparents. And like over like I'd say the course of a year probably, we like finally told them, and it's still not something that we like openly discuss. And I go home and just talk about gayness and like everything that I'm doing in my. But now, thankfully, like after 10 years have passed, like I've introduced everyone to like boyfriends or guys that I'm dating. So like overall coming out really wasn't too bad comparatively to some horror stories that I've heard, like obviously that we all hear every day, and people are like left and kicked out of the house and things like that, which I'm thankful for. But it was like in the middle of the spectrum where like it was I think mostly just me being comfortable with myself, as opposed to worrying this whole time like if I'd be judged or what my parents would say or what the family's response would be. So in the middle, I would say, of like the road of a really tough coming out and a really easy coming out. But I think like I said, the longest thing of it was me just taking away what people would think of me and that judgment. Because like once I said my mom was told, the rest of it was like smooth sailing, thankfully.
See, the reason why I laughed is I had a rough coming out. We're gonna go into it, but it's like I would say like the weirdest thing is like, you talked about all the people you had to come out to.
Mm-hmm.
And again, for being somebody who's my age, it's like weird to say this statement, but it's like a lot of my family is dead. Like that's
sad, but I understand what you mean. Yeah.
Because it's like I never had to worry about telling grandparents because both sets of grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
My again, having an older dad, my dad's mother, my grandma, died when I was 12. So, I mean, she was the last living grandparent I had.
Mm.
And then, like, so then, okay, so to my coming out story. So I say in some ways I was fortunate because I only had to tell one parent because I came out 4 months after my mom died. So.
Oh, wow. That's a lot to happen in like your life at one time.
Yeah.
Like, big life changes at one time.
Yeah. It's going to get worse. So, so like I told my dad and my sister who were both accepting.
That's good.
Which was good. Yeah. I came out to a youth minister. Mistake.
I feel like that could, I want to hear more about that. Because I feel like in today's society, like sometimes certain churches can be like super tolerant and like super lenient about it and totally accepting. And other times you have different churches and different denominations that are still like would judge it like very severely.
Well, because, okay, I will say this. If it was like an older youth minister, I feel like it would have gone a little bit better. This guy was 23 years old. So like I told him about this like performance idea I had with like a knife and how I'd practice stabbing myself because I'm dramatic, obviously. And so he left the room. He came back in about 10 minutes later. He said, you have one of two options. Either you're coming with me or I'm calling the cops.
Coming with me to do what?
If I had known what he was gonna do, I would have let him call the cops. Right. So he took me to get a psych eval.
Okay, that was like okay. That was different than I was expecting, but okay.
I passed it. Here's the part. I passed it. He lied. He lied to the people at the hospital to make it seem like I was lying, and as a result, I got locked in a mental institution for 64 hours.
That is mind-blowing. I mean, it's interesting because, like, I mean, I know age is just a number and it doesn't necessarily, it's not parallel to, like, your mentality, but you would think that a younger youth minister around, like, in their 20s would be more accepting of, like, the time and be more accepting of that than someone who is older. But I guess, like I said, it just depends on, like, the denomination, the specific church, like, how strictly they follow the Bible or whatever, but that's horrible.
Yeah. Well, actually, no. I say mental. Okay. I have to describe this a little bit better because mental institution, I feel like puts a better like vision of where I was like in people's minds. So essentially, the place that I was in, there weren't like people in white coats. Like there wasn't anything like that. Thank God. I would have felt scared in a place like that.
Yeah, for real.
But it was still a place where like I had to give them everything. I had to give them my phone, my wallet, my keys, my shoes.
That's so messed up. It sucks like when you're like you said, like you're finally in a place where like you're comfortable like telling people and like finally you're still like going through so much like struggling internally, and then you finally feel comfortable to start to talk about it, and that's the like response that you get. You know what I mean? Like, it's not exactly a positive like reinforcing that you did the right thing. It's like it just kind of like puts you back into like, oh, am I doing the right thing by coming out? Did I like do the right thing by telling this person when you shouldn't have those reservations at all?
Yeah,
that's nuts.
Which I will say, like, eventually, as you say, when you step back from it, like in the moment, like it feels like shocking, but like once you step back from it enough, you kind of find the humor in what happened. Like.
I think that's how a lot of people, I mean, everyone's different, but I think that's how a lot of people like not resolve, but like get over trauma. I mean, another long story, I was arrested, was in jail for 4 months. And looking back on that, like now it's like really mind blowing because that was such like a life altering like thing that really like fucks with people mentally. But like looking back on it now, and it was only a few years ago, like I just like me and my friends and the people just find ways to like laugh about it because like what else, you know what I mean? Like what else are you gonna do? Like it just, you find humor in like the dark things to kind of get over something and get
My favorite was, and I love telling people this part, so there's a lady in there who like didn't speak English, but like what she did was she made like flowers out of like cigarette cartons. So I'm like, you better work, bitch. Like,
that's amazing. Good for her.
Yeah.
Good for
Yeah.
her. That's crazy. But good for you though. I mean, like that, like that's the shit that like as crazy as it is and traumatic it is. And sometimes when you hear it, holy shit, it still makes you like part of who you are, and it still helps you like you said, get through the trauma by like becoming so lighthearted about it and finding humor in it.
And then like after I got out, so I have to say, first of all, before I say this next part, there are a lot worse versions of what happened to me. So I went into conversion therapy, but as I said, there are worse versions. Like I wasn't like electroshocked or anything like that. Like
yeah, you hear shit like that, which is sad.
But it's like I did have someone who was a therapist. That's what it was described to me as. She worked for the church. She wasn't a therapist. She's basically a counselor. They trapped in a room with me, got me to talk. And then at some point she's like, well, let's just pray to see if this can go away. I think it was on like session like 3 or 4.
That's so insane.
And we did. And then I thought it worked for about 6 hours. And then like I saw a guy who I was like attracted to. I saw his ass and then got hard. And I'm like, nope.
Well, so were you in a place at this time where like you feel like you were still, I guess, like able or willing to like change your mind? Or were you in a point where you're like, fuck this, I know I'm gay, I'm just gonna like say what I have to do in order to like, you know what I mean, convince them that I'm not and get the fuck out of here?
No, I thought, well, this is the thing. I came out as bisexual.
Okay.
And it was about 2 years. It was 2 years later when I finally said I was gay. It was a time where like, oh, I remember exactly what it was. So I went to see Lady Gaga and Cher in the same month. And my sister's like, just admit that you're gay.
Right. No, totally straight. I just happened to love girls. That's my favorite.
And I'm like, fine, you're right. You know what? You're right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sometimes that's what it takes. Like maybe you knew, maybe you didn't, but I feel like it takes other people like kind of like connecting the dots for you, being like, you just saw Cher and Lady Gaga, like you're gay. Spoiler alert. That's funny. Did you like how, I mean, when you were there, like how, like you said, you were there for like 60 or 70 hours. Like how did they, like, what were their guidelines to decide that like you were good to go or that you were cured, or like how did they sign off on your paperwork to be dismissed?
Okay. So what happened was, the only reason I had to stay 64 hours is because this is the way, at least I believe, I was brought in on a weekend.
Okay.
And it took, so like, I was tested and everything. Okay, so I'll just go into more details about this. So when they what's called, I don't know if they call it this in Philly where you're from, but in Florida they call it Baker acting, when they basically put you on a suicide hold. And it's like, so it's like, so when they did it, like what happened was I was like sitting back, like my dad had already been like called, or I had already called my dad. I was like on the phone with my dad, and I'm like, yeah, just come back here and get me. And then all of a sudden I had a cop yell at me. He's like, get off the phone. I'm like,
Damn.
And I'm like, and then I was put into a room, and it took them 5 hours to tell me. So I was just sitting in this hospital room, not knowing anything.
That's so crazy. So because it was a weekend, you had to almost like wait until like a weekday to have like the authorization to be like cleared, or someone to like be there to have like a power to.
Well, this was the thing. It's like, I don't know. It's like the weekend psychiatrist was like, well, I'm trying to think about how to phrase it. It's almost like he was trying to make me feel guilty for like being a performer and like having these ideas and like practicing them. He's like playing with knives is dangerous. I'm like, I know that. Like,
yeah.
I understand.
Right. Right.
But then like on Monday when I guess like the regular person, he literally talked to my dad and he's like, this is a well-adjusted young man. I don't know why somebody ever brought him in here. Like,
yeah, because like it almost like when you said that, it almost like reminded me like of like a jail situation where like sometimes if you're arrested on like a Friday or a Saturday, you're held longer because you have to wait for like the judges and like the people that work weekdays to like process you. So you're kind of fucked if you get stuck there on a weekend because you have to wait until Monday anyway to start the actual like, processing process and be seen by a judge. So it's just like bad luck of timing, basically, like when you get put there.
Yeah. And like, this is just the proof. When I was like brought to this place, they didn't even have room for me. So like, they didn't even have a room for me. So like, I literally, my first night there's like a bed next to the reception desk. So like, you're sleeping there.
That's so nuts. And what city in Florida was this in? Was this like
This was in okay, so I know you're not familiar with this area. This was in Fort Pierce. So like
South Florida or like west?
Yeah. No. It's in okay, so it's like where I'm at, it's about like an hour north of me.
Okay.
So like because what happened was the youth minister brought me into one hospital and they're like, there was a facility that was like maybe 30 minutes. Like there would have been like a facility that's like 30 minutes away. Instead, he drove me to the next available hospital, which was an hour away. So it's like, yeah.
Well, yeah, I just asked that because, like, I mean, I've lived here long enough now to know that there are certain, like, pockets and regions in Florida that, I mean, obviously the political system in Florida as a state is fucked up and a whole nother story. But, like, there are obviously pockets of the city that are, like South Florida, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, people are obviously a little more accepting and a little more, like, caught up with a generation.
Right.
But if you drive, like, hours in a certain direction, you're suddenly in, like, the most conservative, different landscape entirely.
Well, see, this is the thing where it's like, I consider like, here's the thing, like, as you said, Miami's very like liberal,
younger,
and it's just in like a liberal sense, and like Orlando is liberal, but it's liberal in a different way because it's like liberal, but there's like a large black population in Orlando, so it's like liberal, but it's religious, so it's like. It's a little bit different kind of liberal, but it's like it's still it's not like as conservative. Like
I mean it's not always the case, but I guess usually I feel like when you think like city, like just because you have like a bigger population, people are a little more liberal as a whole. There are exceptions, but like then you drive to like the more rural areas of the state, even in like Pennsylvania, like Philly is obviously more liberal. You can drive west to like Harrisburg area and you're in like Trump territory passing all of these like Trump flags. It's just like the same state can be so different politically, even though it's just the state. And Florida is the perfect example of that, where like there's so many pockets of different levels of acceptance and ways of upbringing and et cetera, et cetera.
Well, that's because South Florida also has a lot of transplant like New Yorkers, so it's like, and then but even with that, it's like you have a mix of like you have the Jewish people who are usually more like liberal, but then you meet like some New Yorkers who are like very conservative. It's like it's like it's like you all came from the same city. It's like
no, it all goes back to say like obviously we go off a whole podcast about how Florida is a fucking fascinating place in itself, but yes it's a place.
So, I know you said you just moved to Fort Lauderdale, you're in where? You're in Fort Lauderdale or you're in Miami?
Fort Lauderdale. Yeah, like I'm like 10 minutes away from like Wilton Manors.
Yeah. So, what was it like for you moving to Fort Lauderdale?
So, it was very easy. Like I spent, like I said, most of my time in between college and now. I lived in New York for like a little bit. I moved away from DC for like 7 months, but I just like the more I lived in DC, I just realized it wasn't for me. And I just got like more and more bored of it. So I'm the kind of person who like very much welcomes change. I just have like ADD in all sides of my life, and I just like traveling and like moving. And I had great friends in DC, but like even after a couple of years of it, I was just like, okay, I want to get the fuck out of here. But I just had nothing to finally like push me to like do it. Like there was no breaking point where I was like, okay, now is the time to move.
Yeah.
So like last year, I was like in a 2-year relationship at the time, and I knew I wanted to break up with my boyfriend. And not that that was, I would say, the reason that pushed me out, because I would have had no problem staying in DC and like resolving things with him there. But it was kind of like, I'm bored of DC anyway. Like I've been wanting to leave for years. I'm living with my boyfriend in this relationship that I'm not happy with anymore. I have a full-time job where I work in marketing. So I was like, I work remote, which is great. So it was kind of like all these like connections were being made for me. It was like, look, now you have the chance to actually get up and try something different. Like all the stars are aligning. Like you can end your relationship. You can try something new. You know, like now's the time that you've been like waiting for all these years to finally get the fuck out of DC. Because I was just so over it. And it was just this weird situation where I travel so much and I have experiences in like so many cities around the US. I have like friends almost like in every big city. So I literally could have lived anywhere. And people always ask me, why the fuck did you choose South Florida? Like having this blank slate. And it was just because like last year I was traveling down here a lot for my other job, like my marketing job.
Yeah.
I work for a fitness chain that has a bunch of locations in South Florida. So I was just getting like more and more close to like a lot of my friends down here. So at the time, it kind of made me put on these like rose-colored glasses where I was like, oh, they're having the time of their lives. Like they party all the time. And like I was enjoying like getting to know my friends down here better. So I was kind of like, it's an easy move. It's like not super far away. I can get home and see family easily. So I ended things with my boyfriend. I basically said like I'm like finally moving. It obviously wasn't news for him either that I was like getting tired of DC, because I'd always complained to him anyway. And I feel like everyone in DC always says they hate DC and they're looking for a reason to move. So it wasn't shocking to anyone that I was leaving. But yeah, like I'm the kind of person who I'm like very social. I'm relatively easy to get along with, and I kind of adapt to like the personalities of who I'm around. So moving to Florida, it was very easy. Like I said, I had friends down here already. Like I kind of knew the area and the lay of the land from coming down here so often for work. I obviously love to go out and party, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm like a circuit queen. I say that with like a little bit of embarrassment, but I own the fuck out of it. So like that's why it was kind of like people always ask like why I chose to be here, and there really wasn't one reason. It was just because it was a place to go that I like knew enough about. I knew it checked all the boxes at the moment that I was looking for. And I know I'm not going to be here forever. I might not last down here for longer than a couple of years, but I'm content with it for now. And it's warmer than it was in DC. I have a good group of friends. I'm obviously like thriving in my alt life that I've just kind of discovered for myself. So it hasn't really been a hard adjustment. It's just very different culturally and weather wise, but I like it so far, I guess. All the jokes about the side.
See, I will say this. Now I can tell you why I moved to Orlando. So the first time I made a mistake. The first time I lived in the suburbs. So it's like
suburbs of Orlando?
Yeah. So I lived like half an hour outside of the city. So I pretty much like stayed in my apartment the whole time. Yeah. I'm a musician. So like what I would do is like I would perform at like different open mics and like do that kind of stuff. I'm actually, as I say, the drag queen who actually has the different experience of performing in straight bars first, but it's like,
that's interesting.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, we'll get a little more into that when we talk about the first time you performed. So it's like when I moved back home afterwards, and then like when I moved back, my sister thought I was crazy. So like I moved into the hood in Orlando, but. She's like, it's so unsafe. I'm like, yeah, but it's affordable.
Yeah. Orlando in general, like even not like even downtown Orlando, like obviously the prices are so different of like apartments and real estate. It's like just because my friends down here, a lot of them like similar to you, they kind of move around Florida. Like a lot of my friends came from Orlando or lived in Orlando recently. Yeah. And like just a few months ago, we did like a Disney trip for the first time where like a bunch of us like went down to Orlando just for a weekend. And of course, the main point of the weekend ended up being like basically nothing to do with Disney. And we just partied and went to like the gay places in Orlando. But it was like my first experience being in Orlando like literally a month ago. It's ironic that wasn't just like Disney World or Universal with my family. And I got to see like more of the city, and they introduced me to like their friend group that still lives in Orlando. So I saw like the gay clubs and the gay bars, and it was fun for a weekend, but I could not imagine permanently living in Orlando as like it's just very, very different. Very, very different.
It's like, so yeah, I lived there the second time I lived there for 3 years, and it's like, well, actually 3, almost 4 years. And like,
that's a while.
I ended up having to like move back home because there's something with an apartment. Like, they literally, so it wasn't like anything. I got kicked out of an apartment. So like, I got kicked out of an apartment and ended up moving back home. It's like one of those things where it's like, as I say, they kicked me out for a stupid reason. They kicked me out because they like said my apartment wasn't like clean enough, because it was like, I think like I had like clothes on my floor or something. Like,
how'd they even know?
And
like how
they went into my apartment one time without like telling me, and
so
they did a surprise inspection.
Like clearly a bullshit reason that they were just trying to get you out for whatever else.
Because it's like, I always pay my rent on time. Like, I'm not one of those people who's like, people who like get the like, I mean, granted, like obviously it's hard, and sometimes you get an eviction notice on your thing, but it's like, I'm always the person who's like, try to pay rent within like 5 days of when it's due, because it's usually like what most places do. And it's like I'm paying my rent on time. It's like, I'm like, yes, am I cleaning up as much as like some people do? But in my defense, I was working a lot of times like 12-hour days, so it's like I was never home.
Right. Was this like an apartment, like an apartment like complex building, or was it like a house that has like a landlord and like 4 tenants?
No. It was an apartment complex. I lived 2 places. I lived in a duplex the majority of the time I was in Orlando. And the reason I ended up leaving there is because, as I said, paying rent on time, there was, so like 1 year, like my landlord forgot to have me sign a lease, but I kept paying rent, so he didn't notice that I didn't sign a lease. So like the next time he got me to sign a lease, he wanted to raise my rent $100. I'm like, no,
fuck that. I'm fine with my month-to-month hidden arrangement that we have.
Yeah. And it's like, and I'm like that because he like the first year raised my rent $50, but he like hired a lawn mowing service. I'm like, that's fine. You want to raise my rent $50? That makes sense. But it's like,
it's justified or something.
Yeah. But it's like, you want to raise my rent $100 because like you're like, everything around here is going for more than this. I'm like, yeah, this apartment's a piece of shit. Like,
also, it's not even true. Like, all buildings like try to raise it, and then it frustrates the shit out of me because like even my building that I'm in now, for example, my lease is up in January, and I can see like my exact unit or like the layouts of the unit that are like cheaper than I'm paying like currently for rent.
Yeah,
but they're still gonna send me a notice saying like, oh, we're raising your rent, even though I'm not a dumbass. I can log online and see that like this exact layout is cheaper than I'm currently paying. Yeah, you're gonna try to convince me that it's worth more than that. It's so stupid.
Yeah, and it's like they're talking about like all these skyscrapers downtown. I'm like, yes, I'm in the middle. Okay, this is how like hood this place I was living at. So there were people next door to, not right next door to me, but like the next like house over, who were raising chickens that they let roam around free. And I'm like,
I would call that hood adjacent.
Yes, it's like, and I'm like, you gonna tell me that this place is worth
You can't just
more.
Yeah, I understand.
It's like, I mean, granted, I was older the first time I had sex, so being surrounded by black people, being a thick bitch with a fat ass helped.
Fair.
That's like, what was it? How did I describe? I described my front door as like Disney World for dick. Like,
I'm sure that helped your cause too, like with your landlord, like not to pay like rent. Like I should get a discount because ...
Yeah. It's like you're not gonna get anybody. I saw it. Like I searched up like my apartment. There's nobody living in it now.
Of course, right.
And it's like they want $900 for it. I'm like, are you insane?
Oh my God, what I wouldn't get, I mean, I know like that's like relatively normal for like Orlando, but like $900 to me when I hear that for rent sounds like it's like a fucking like bargain special. If I got like $900 rent, I'd be like, sign me up.
I was paying when I left that apartment, I was paying $750. So I mean, like,
was it your own place, or was this like a shared room in a?
No. It was a 1-bedroom apartment.
God. That's also the difference too, like living up like in the East Coast cities. Like to me, when I hear that, that's like such a discount special. But down here, that's not like, it's normal-ish price. If you're not in like Fort Lauderdale, Miami, that's not crazy. But to me, that just sounds like such a fucking bargain. I would be like, where can I find $900 rent?
I know that's why I would never. Well, that's why I would never move to Miami. That and like. I will say this, like as I said, I've driven in Orlando, I've driven in Atlanta, I drove in Miami like a few months ago, and I'm like, fuck, I hate driving here. Like,
I don't even have a car down here. Granted, I haven't had a car like since college, just because I've always lived in like big metropolitan areas, so I've never like really needed one. But I just haven't even bothered getting one now here because I just Uber to like Wilton, or I'll have friends drive me or what have you, or I walk. So I haven't had to even deal with it. But the times I have driven, I like feel your pain, and I know how bad drivers in Florida are, but also locally, especially, it's terrible.
Well, it's also like Miami has like public transit, right?
Yes. I don't know how good it is, or like all the, like the jokes that people say about it, but yes, they do have somewhat of a public transportation.
At least they have public transit. In Orlando, there's a bus. Right. There's a bus, and there's like there's not even a train that runs in the city. There's a what is it? The Bright Line that runs like starts in Orlando. There's a bus, so it's like
and the Bright Line is how like I mean I don't even go to Miami that often, but when I'm not driving with a friends or paying like a crazy amount for Uber, I'll take the Bright Line. But that used to be just Fort Lauderdale to Miami, and they just started Orlando service within the last few months. Yeah, but it's nice, anyways. But yes, I understand.
So that's why, like, I used to be able to like walk to my job, which was good because, like,
that's great.
There were some days, like, I will say, like, this is a whole nother rant, but I will say this: anyone who thinks, oh, they should own an American car, no. My car was like in and out of the shop like all the time. The whole time I was in Orlando, it's like.
I don't miss. I mean, like there are obviously benefits of having a car, and some days I'm like, it would be easy to get from here. But overall, when I think about like insurance, gas, like paying for repairs, etc., I'm like, I really don't even miss having a car. Like it's just not worth it. But
see,
where you live,
I wouldn't mind being in a city like having a car where it's like I could use it just if like I needed it, but like most of the time be using like public transit, like.
Exactly. And that's the thing too about like living in like at least most apartment buildings. Like I live in a building, but that's how people complain about the cost has risen so much because they basically charge you for your parking space, which in some of these buildings can literally be like $300 a month. So you're basically paying to park your car, which half the time you might not even use anyway. So it's like saying you're just paying more money for it to just like sit here when you're using it to go like 15 minutes away to like a friend's house or like a grocery store. It's the cost outweighs not having, you know what I'm saying? It's better to not have a car and avoid all those unnecessary costs.
Right. So what made you want to start doing OnlyFans?
It's a very, very good question. So like I said, when I first moved down to Florida, it wasn't even like something that was totally, so as of January, this wasn't even something that I was totally leaned into. Not I don't even say this out of arrogance, but it's just how like the thought kind of came into my mind. But like I said, being like a circuit queen, whatever you want to call it, I've been going to parties like all over the country and like meeting new people, and I just have a very expressive and like outgoing personality. So especially when I'm drunk or doing things that make me inebriated, I'm like even more so like I have no issue like going up to people or like introducing myself or like being the person to kind of bring people together. And just like a lot of the like responses that I would get at parties are like, oh my God, like you're so hot or something, or do you even OnlyFans? Like you should start OnlyFans. You'd be perfect for like this kind of thing. And I'm like I like to think that I'm like a very humble person. Like, so especially at the time when I first started hearing that, it was just like flattering, but it was like, no, like, haha, like, thank you so much. But like, no, that's not something that I even am interested in. But the more that kind of started being like things that I would hear, like the idea like slowly would like creep more and more into my mind. Like, oh, well, if there's a want for it or people are at least interested in like asking me about it, then maybe it could be something that I could monetize. But even at the time, like even as of like a year ago, it was just what kind of like made the thought process start. But I was still not really interested in it just because of like family and work. And like I'm the kind of person who, unless I totally like want to like lean forward and commit with it, there's no point in me doing it half-assed. And like more than anyone probably, like to actually make money and be successful in OnlyFans, like it's so much fucking work. It's like not just about like haha having sex, like this is really fun. Like no, you have to market yourself, you have to find creators, like you have to put a lot of fucking time and energy into it. So then when I like first finally like little under a year ago thought, okay, like maybe this could be fun or at least something to try, my ex like boyfriend, the one that I was talking about that I lived in DC with, he used to date like another OnlyFans like porn star, and he basically, I don't want to say he was mean about it because I understand his reasoning, but he was the kind of boyfriend who was like, fuck you, like if we're together, like you're not, like there's no chance like you're doing OnlyFans. Also, going back to the way that I was with my upbringing, like I said with my mom, I'm the kind of person, if you tell me no, then I'm going to be like, no, fuck you. Like I want to do the opposite of that. So like, I'm going to like pursue this more. So I moved down to Florida. I said, not like honestly, not even with the intention of like doing OnlyFans and breaking up with him just for that purpose. But now that I was down here in a place where like there's so many creators and like all of this lifestyle is like pushed into your face, I realized like, hey, I'm single, like I'm young-ish now. Like if I'm gonna even like try this, now is the time to kind of give it a shot. And I have a bunch of friends that like I knew that did it, so I would slowly start to like ask them questions that to me like I wanted answered before making a decision. Like, oh, like how much work is this really? Like, how did you get started? Like, how did you market yourself? Because I just like think like very full processed, and like I started to ask those questions. And like over time, I was like, fuck it, let's do it. Let's see how it goes. And like over time, I just became more comfortable with the idea. I wanted to see how it was. And that was, like I said, in May or June. And since then, it was a very gradual, like overtime process. It wasn't like I just woke up one day and was like, fuck it, I need it for income, or like this is going to be a full-time job. It was just something that like the interest slowly kind of was building. And I was asking these questions over years. And then one day, like recently, I was just like, okay, like I feel like now's the time to give it a go. And it just has slowly been and slowly transpired over like the course of a couple of years.
Yeah. See, I actually had an OnlyFans content creator on here a few weeks ago, and like he was trying to convince me to do it. And this is my thing. Not that like, it's not like, oh my God, I think the idea is so horrible. My thing is, at some point, I know, like as a musician, like I'm a singer songwriter. I want to put out an album, and I don't want everyone to be like, oh, this OnlyFans content creators thinks that they can do fucking music, and then I don't want to sit there and like have to defend myself and be like, no, sis, I've been writing songs since I was 14 years old. Shut the fuck up and let me do.
No, I mean, I think I kind of go back and forth on that because I think like anyone, regardless, like it's 2023, the year aside, like if you want to do something and you have interest in it, regardless of your career or your profession, like, obviously it's not that easy, but like you should fucking do it. It's your life. But I also think, especially in gay culture, in the gay world, I hate that at least when OnlyFans was launching, it felt like all the gays were like getting OnlyFans just because they thought they could. And they were like, oh, I'm hot. I want to film myself having sex. Like, this is fun. It's like, just because you can and you have the outlet to do it doesn't mean that you should like get an OnlyFans just because you think the idea is like alluring or like you just want like an excuse to have sex. It's like, no, do it because like you actually find some kind of like creativity, or like you actually have like a passion, or like there's a reason that you want to do it. And I know some people do it like full time because they need it for like financial means, and that's great. And if they are they have the outlet and the like ability to pull that off, and that's amazing. But I hate when people like basically have to say like, oh, someone like convinced me to do it, or I felt like I had to do it because someone put the idea in my mind. It's like, no, do it because you actually have some sort of like interest or like passion in doing it. And it's not just like some crazy idea someone put into your head and now you think you should do it because someone's telling you it's a good idea.
But some of them needed to, because
I see both sides. I just hate like the stereotype of like, especially like I said, especially when it was starting, it just felt like everyone you'd hear like was like, oh, I'm just gonna do an OnlyFans because I can, or like everyone wants to see me with an OnlyFans. I'm like, no, bitch, no one wants to see you on OnlyFans. Like, it's just because like you can do something doesn't mean you should. But I'm also like, if you have a passion for it and like you want to do it, like of course, like do what makes you happy. But like I just hate how like in Geralt especially lately, it seems like everyone's just doing it because they think it's like the thing to do, or they think there's this high demand to see them on OnlyFans.
But some of them have no personality besides that, so they should just keep on doing it.
Yes. But just like the market is so like oversaturated with just like boring, like muscular, fit, like attractive, like gay white men having sex, and I'm like, I understand that that's like sadly what like a lot of demand for it is, but yeah, like just because you know what I mean, like I don't know. It's like I understand why all the stereotypes of OnlyFans exist, and like I think a lot of times like we as either creators or even people subscribing to them like feed into it for sure. But agreed, like a lot of the people that I've met and a lot of the struggles that I've faced with OnlyFans has been dealing with, like you said, these almost like personality-less. It's such a struggle, like getting people to like agree to collab with, but that is a lot of the market, and that is a lot of what OnlyFans is today, which is sad. But I'm realizing that more and more the further I like go into it.
Right. As I said, I sometimes see on Instagram like people say like, I'm basically going to cut back on doing OnlyFans. I'm going to go like back into nursing. I'm thinking like, good luck losing half your fans, fucker. Like, are you stupid?
Well, that's also why it's hard, because like you have to actually obviously work to make money. And that's why I try to like, I mean, sometimes it's hard with like my other job and working, but like people are paying to see you because you're like putting out content. Like no one's going to pay whatever amount a month to see you post once, or post like a picture of you in your fucking bathroom with a boner just because it's like content. Like people are going to unsubscribe or like stop paying for a service that you're not keeping like updated or like actually putting work into. So it's like if you have the ability to like put out new content and keep a hold of your subscribers, that's great. However you're doing it, but you know, you have to like pick a lane at some point. Like you either have to put the time into it and make it profitable, or pick something else, or like do both, but do both successfully and have the time and energy to put into both another career and your OnlyFans as well.
Right.
It's hard. It's really fucking hard, especially when you have another job. Like anyone who works multiple jobs in capacity understands how tricky it is to like feel stressed and overworked and be working 12 hours a day and then also putting time into another job.
Right. Totally. And I will say to those of you thinking about leaving OnlyFans and think, oh, I'm going to go do music. No, we do not need another talentless person making music. Like,
no, it's like pick, like, I understand, like if you, like I said, if you have the time and the passion to do multiple things and you do well, amazing. But to most people, I feel like need to kind of like stay in their lanes to an extent and do what A, they want, but B is it looks like success to them. Like it's, you don't just need to be putting your like your hat in all the buckets because you can.
Right. So what was it like for you the first time you filmed?
So without going like too far on a tangent, that's kind of like a tricky question for me, because the first video I ever posted on OnlyFans was like almost just like a regular sex video that I actually ironically filmed at a circuit party with someone who is a very big name in the OnlyFans industry. So I met this person or this couple knowing like who they were, and they like wanted to film us having sex, and I was the kind of person who I'm like, sure, but like we all agreed like not to post it because I knew they were on OnlyFans. I wasn't at the time, so I was like, this is just like a hot sex video for me. So at the time, it was like almost like, I can't really say like that was my first experience being filmed, because it was almost just like me filming like a regular sex video with a hookup or with a friend. But like I ended up knowing who they were and knowing that they wouldn't care that it was posted. I ended up using that as like my first actual content that was posted. So that's like what's kind of like a tricky answer, is because like it wasn't filmed with the intent of me posting it on OnlyFans and like having the mentality of, oh, this is sex being filmed for work. But I had the idea that this might end up someday like seeing the light of day or being like seen by the public. So like that was fine and not as much pressure, because it was more just like recreational fucked up sex.
Right.
But then when I did my actual first like collaboration, it was like very different, because like you said, you're going into it with this totally different mentality. This isn't just for fun.
Yeah.
You're now worried about performance. I'm mostly a top, so I can only like hide my faking it so much. Like if I'm not hard, it's not going to work. But so too, you're worried about like performance, but B, like as you're having sex, you're also thinking about the fact that like you're having sex on camera and the potential of like hundreds or thousands of people are watching you. So it definitely was a little like nerve wracking, because it makes you view sex in a totally different way, because you're thinking about like looking good, like your performance, like people watching. But it just makes you think of sex in like a totally different light. And the way that my head works is like I just have this like natural anxiety of, like I said, like wanting to do anything that I do like well and successfully. So I kind of put more anxiety on myself than like a normal person might, just because of the personality that I have. But yeah, like that was another concern too. Like when you asked why I was doing OnlyFans in the first place, I was also afraid that it would ruin sex for me, and it took the pleasure out of like sex, because so much time like focused on finding people to collab with and work with, and when you're having sex that often, it ruins the fun. It's not like no longer like random hookups, you're working. And like I've already, it's sad, but even in just a few months I've noticed that I don't really have as much interest in like random hookups anymore, because you spend so much energy and like focus, and your whole viewpoints on sex kind of shift once you're doing it so publicly and doing it like for work instead of for pleasure.
See, that's actually kind of interesting, because it's like the thing about like random hookups, I don't have much interest in that much anymore now myself, but I feel like that's something I learned about myself as I was getting older. It was like real fun when I was like in my early 20s to like when I got to 25, and then all of a sudden just recently I'm like I have a friends with benefits. It's like I like having sex with you more anyway. You know exactly what I want you to do. I know exactly what you want done to you. Like,
and you still
this is easier. Yeah,
you still find ways to keep it fun and spicy.
Yeah, it's just like
no, I totally agree. I mean, I was. It's like funny because like doing this now, like what I do, like for work, whatever you want to call it. Like, I'm the same way where like, I mean, I would obviously like have sex. Like, I'm not like totally like hoe status, but like I wouldn't like I was on Grindr, I guess I could say, like more like for fun, just like people like scroll on Instagram to see who's there. But like the amount of times like that, even in my 20s, like that I would actually like go through and like meet up with someone on Grindr was like very rare. I wasn't like having sex like weekly, like having guys over like on a rotating basis. I would sometimes like bring guys home from like parties on occasion, or like I would go home with someone after like meeting them in person. But even so, like I wouldn't consider, compared to like some of my friends or what like the gay stereotype is, I wasn't someone who was like actively having hookups. But even more so now that I'm doing this, like to my point, like it's even less than it was before. Like it's very, very rare that I have like a random hookup, just you put so much work into like finding them and filming that it's just even more exhausting than it was before.
Right.
But teach their own. Like I don't judge obviously anyway, but it just fascinates me that some of my friends will have guys like over like every few days, and I'm like, doesn't it just get like not only physically tiring, but just the idea of it eventually it's like, okay, it's like kind of the same old bullshit. Like, okay, you find a hot guy, great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Just depends. And you go through levels of like, I feel like horniness. And as gays, we have like months where we're like really horny and all we want is sex. And we have these lulls of like, it's a little less exciting.
it's also like the time, like that's the other thing, like especially like between like my regular job that I work 5 days a week, I do this twice a week. Sometimes 3 times a week. Like literally this week I'm doing an interview with you, I'm doing an interview with somebody on Thursday, and I'm doing an interview with somebody on Saturday. And it's like I don't have time.
No, exactly. And I feel like schedules never like, especially like in different industries and like working in nightlife, I feel like the times that you're able to potentially like hook up with something, they never justify with other people. They never line up with other people where they're in sync. I feel like whenever I'm on Grindr, like you said, like the times that I am horny, it's like rare to find someone else that's like also available and on the same like wavelength and energy as you are.
Right.
So it's true. It does depend on like so many factors, but when you're busy juggling multiple jobs and a personal life, it's hard to find time to even like get a substantial, worthwhile hookup.
Right. So, there we go. So, what's the freakiest thing you've done on a shoot?
These are such good questions. I mean, like I hate to be like boring, but like since I'm so new, I feel like I'm a little more, I don't want to say reserved, but like since it's still so new to me and I'm like trying to figure out like what I'm comfortable with and like how people like work in this industry, I like haven't had like really any crazy things. I mean, the only thing is like you can probably see on my Instagram, like I've always been like really into like wrestling like growing up. So that's like a fetish of mine. And like for whatever reason, it's like nice because like those videos and the idea like seems to be very well received, both like financially and people have been asking to see. So it kind of like works in my favor to sometimes like do some of those things. But like I don't even say like I feel like that's such like a common like cliche or like fetish or like whatever you want to call it in like the gay world now that it's not even that crazy. I mean, I've had some like requests for like I'm not into like fisting and stuff like that personally. Like I said, as time goes on and I become more comfortable with doing that kind of stuff, like would I say like no? No, but like I haven't had any like I haven't filmed anything that I would consider to be crazy yet. I've had some interesting encounters with other collaborators. I don't want to get like too specific to like out these people, but like just some. Again, not throwing shade on the like creator community, but some of these people are just so like wild and just nuts. Like it's impossible like getting a hold of these people to commit to something and like actually show up for a shoot. But then half the times when you do find them, they're either like so strung out or like not. It's like wild shit that you can only write a book of. But again, I'm not gonna be shady. I'm not going to give individual names, but I haven't, like I said, I'm too new to have. I'm very. I have like a manager now and like he's like, oh, you should have sex with like this person, and I'm the kind of person where like if I'm not attracted to them sexually myself, I'm not going to do it like just for money or just for clout, because again it's top. I can have all like the Trimex or like Viagra or Cialis in the world, but mentally if you're not there and you don't have a physical attraction to someone, it's not gonna work. And it doesn't come off as authentic on camera either, like as like good sex, because you can tell that there's no like sexual connection or like passion there. So I'm still, like I said, new to it, where like I'm very picky about like who I collab with. It's very like thought out. So I haven't like done anything like super crazy yet, because all the people that I've chosen to collab with are because I personally want to, and not because they just have hundreds of thousands of subscribers, or it'd be like a good idea for me. Like I said, I want to be doing something because I want to do it, and I want the attraction level to be there with the other person. So I'm sure like if we interview again, like in a year, I'll have some like crazy cameras. But right now it's like relatively controlled and like stuff that I'm into, because I want it to come off as authentic and real and something that like I would want to see myself, you know?
Yeah. And it's also, there's some times where people like, there's one time I asked an OnlyFans content creator that question. They're like I got peed on once. I'm like, motherfucker. And I thought in my head, I'm like, motherfucker, I saw you got fisted on Twitter. You're going to tell me that the freakiest thing you did was get somebody pee on you?
Well, it's so interesting because like today, like, but we say when like someone say like weird or crazy, like especially again being gay, like that's so different in everyone's mind. Like what I might think of as something like super like vanilla and like boring, like someone else might view as like totally crazy. So yeah, we have these things that obviously are to everyone like nuts and wild, and you can't really argue it. But with how like sexually open and how like sexually like fluid and like willing to experiment we all are. I feel like everyone's
Yeah.
level and idea of crazy is so different and so unique, which is interesting because it makes you like, that's how you kind of like, I think, discover new fetishes and also like find things that you might not even have realized you were into until like meeting with someone and learning more about what makes them tick sexually.
Right.
I mean, what's the craziest thing you would ever say that you've done sexually, you know?
Okay, so I am gonna ooh. See, this all depends. Like, some people like crazy things. So like, one thing that I like, especially now, I'm very much the person where it's like very simple as like a bottom, and like, because I bottom primarily, it's like, if you're not eating my ass before you fuck me, you're not fucking me. Like, I am like point blank period. And there's some guys who like, oh, I would never do that. And I'm like, really? You think this is freaky? Like, you think this is straight? I like, to me, this seems like vanilla. Like,
no, I totally agree. And like, that's why, like, to me too, like, the same but different. Like, that's what I said earlier. Like, when I said OnlyFans has just become a place where like pretty white boys, like with no brains, like just fuck and feel themselves having sex. Like, no, like, why not try putting something like other than sex on your channel? Like, yeah, like most things I feel like usually lead to anal or lead to fucking, but sometimes like people just want to see videos of like you eating someone's ass or like wrestling or fisting. Like, there's so much creativity that like OnlyFans, like, and all these platforms allow you to have, but everyone just thinks of it as, oh, like this is just videos of me like having sex. There's no like foreplay. It's just like fucking. And no, like what you want or what a subscriber wants or what you even want sexually yourself is not always just getting to town, like fucking each other and topping and bottoming. Like,
exactly,
you have things you want. And like the only like porn needs to also to be sometimes more like that, I think, because it's how I found that the more specific, like unique things that isn't just fucking is what's actually the most profitable content.
Exactly.
So it's interesting. Yes, you know what you want specifically, and you shouldn't be afraid to address that or let someone tell you that that's weird or different. But to me, it's the same. Like, the real world should be like OnlyFans. Like, everyone's not there just to buy videos of people fucking. You know what you like and what you want when you're getting laid. So like, why shouldn't that also be translated into OnlyFans or like what more of the online porn community looks like too?
And sometimes, like, especially in the real world, you have to be able to say, like, tell your line. Like, I had a guy who told me, he's like, one time, he's like, I won't eat your ass, but I love your ass so much, I just want to fuck you. I'm like, well, then get you a friend who can.
Exactly. Like, you shouldn't have any embarrassment or shame telling someone what you want. But that also being said, like, if someone doesn't want to do that or doesn't feel the same way, you don't want to feel like you're forcing someone to do that either.
Right.
So you move on to the next one until you find someone who is a connection, even if it's just for sex, because you're both going to enjoy it so much more when you're both on the same page and have the same interests or same way of like at least wanting to please each other or make each other happy.
Right. So what made you want to start go-go dancing?
I don't know that I do. So I first, well, you know, Gio, it sounds like, but like even before I decided to start doing OnlyFans, I was at a party down here and I met this guy named Gio, who, for those of you who don't know, is kind of like a South Florida, Fort Lauderdale party host slash like content creator slash like manager. Like, he kind of just like finds these mostly twinks and like finds ways to like manage them or like books them for appearances or like helps out with shooting, kind of like a gay world liaison, for lack of a better term. But he's a very energetic and eccentric, loud personality. And I met him at a party, and of course, like, he had heard from my friend like that I was like even thinking about the idea of doing OnlyFans. And at the time, he was going to help me kind of like start my career because like I didn't know what I wanted and I didn't know how to like start and how to market myself. So I kind of like started filming with him, just like solo stuff. And he had some like talent that like was willing to shoot with me. So it took out a lot of like the step one shit that I was questioning in my mind.
Yeah.
So I started like slowly doing stuff with him and like using him to help build like connections and like relationships down here. And like I said, since he did throw like a lot of these parties at like Boardwalk and like a La Boy and these like Fort Lauderdale clubs,
yeah,
he was like, hey, like you're doing this, like, you know, you want to make videos, like why don't you come try like dancing? I was like, what the fuck? Like, I'm not a dancer. I don't know how to dance on a pole. I have never like, except of a circuit party, I've never like been in public like that doing that. And I'd always made clear to him that like my view and my desire of like doing this world is like strictly online stuff. So like, go-go dancing and being any kind of like performance gay was never really like on my radar and something that I wanted to pursue. But of course, like Gio has a very, like I said, strong personality, and it's like, no, you're gonna be fine. It's gonna be great. Just do it. So I agreed to do it like one day at Boardwalk, which for those who don't know, is like a very like seedy but fun like strip club down here in Fort Lauderdale. And I was like, Gio, like, what the fuck am I gonna do? Like, I don't know how to dance. Like, no one knows who I am. I'm just starting this. And they do these things called like shower shows where you literally like shower basically with someone else and like dance to music and like kiss each other and touch each other. I was like, fine. And like I said, at the time I was like so uncertain and so afraid of doing it. But I was like, again, it's a way to make more money, to get my name out there and like market myself, because that was what was the whole nerve-wracking part of this.
Yeah.
So like Gio kind of like forced me into doing it, and I realized that it wasn't as terrible as I like thought it was. So now like sometimes when he has like openings, I'll be like, hey, do you want to like dance at Boardwalk? Do you want to like do this? And my first time actually like dancing on stage after doing like that shower show was like terrible, because like you feel so dumb when everyone's just like watching you dance like for money. But it's one of those things where like kind of like anything, like the first time you do it is so nerve-wracking because you're like, what the literal fuck am I doing right now? But you learn by kind of like doing and by trying it. So it's nuts that like the first time I did it, that's kind of like how it happened, was literally like Gio like forcing me into doing it. And I still don't love it. And like I said, I still want most of my work to be focused on like online content and making videos, because I have more like control over it and it's just more what I enjoy. But I do actually kind of like the performances and like every so often like doing something like that, because it is actually kind of fun and it's a way to make extra money and meet new people as well.
You have a case of the Caucasians. It's fine. See, I actually can move like as a performer. That's why like there's one time somebody like watched me perform. They're like, "Are you Spanish?" I'm like, "No, I'm white. Like, I'm very, very white. I just happen to know how to like."
Well, see, that's like, what would you consider to be like? That's another interesting thing, because like at certain clubs, maybe it's just down here. Like if you're a go-go dancer, at least the clubs that like I would like work at or be performing at, that basically means you have to be like a pole dancer or a strip pole dancer. Like I have no problem necessarily like being on a box, because I can like move. But like once you put the pole into it and like you have to suddenly do like all this like this finagling, and like working a pole and knowing how to pole dance is so different than like being on a box and just kind of like dancing by yourself and like having rhythm and like movement.
Yeah.
And like that to me, like I always feel like it's so scary, because all the stages that I've been on have always been kind of like pole oriented, and I'm like, I don't know what the fuck to do on a pole. Like I can dance and like be like sexy for a certain amount of time, but then when you see me on a pole, like a fucking idiot, like not knowing at all like what I'm doing. But again, I'd imagine you learn that by like doing and actually like practicing pole dancing. But it's crazy how good some people are at it and literally act like it's nothing and can move around it. Like it's crazy. It's like really, really wild.
Well, just like tell the DJ to play "Give Me More" by Britney Spears, and you could do like her version of pole dancing on that video, which basically her just like walking around the pole and like dipping down.
That's basically what I do. That's what like my pole experience has been so far. Like I feel so dumb. Then I watch them and I'm like, okay, like you can tell when someone's like feeling the music and like into it. Like you see these people that are like so good at it, and like literally it's what they do for like almost their job, and it's almost like beautiful, and like how crazy and like flexible people's motions are when they dance on a pole.
It's like I've seen some of them. Well, first of all, I get it. When you're like talking about, I'm just going to use an example of the one person. When you got people who's like, you see people like Jed who are like on the pole and like do all that. I understand like why you wouldn't want to do that. It's like because you know you can't do that. Like,
yeah, we'll be on the same like just the last time I was at Boardwalk, we're on the same like poster, so we're like doing one of Gio's parties the same nights, and like it's like you said, she's amazing, and it's like so fascinating to watch. But then like you'll follow up a performance by Jed, and then like someone will watch that and it's so breathtaking, and then you're just like, I'm supposed to like follow that with having like limited to no public experience. That makes you feel even more stupid. And it's just like people are now like expecting to see this like amazing pole dancer. They see Jed and it's like, wow. And that's like, here's Tanner, and it's not that. So it's just like makes the pressure even more like substantial. But it's just interesting. People like have like in this world, regardless if it's like a video or if it's like in-person appearances, like everyone has like such specific like reasons as to why they do it and what they want to do in this world.
Right.
But performances are more fun, to like go back to your question. They are more fun and more engaging than I thought. So again, it's not what my focus is going to be on, but I definitely like do say yes a lot more than I thought I would, and am more willing to do more in club stuff than when I started doing it.
Right. So, okay. So now, since you kind of discussed the first time you performed, so now going back to performing in the straight bars, like,
yeah.
So, like, the thing is, like, my thing is, especially the one bar like I performed at the most, I used to open the show because like I knew that like my music was so different. Like you would have everybody come in with like their guitar, because that's. And like I make electronic music, so literally I would come in with like my iPod and like go hook it up and have this like boom 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 noise, and like just like do my songs, and like it's actually the like I love this story. So like there was one week where like the week before I had screamed motherfucker into the microphone after one of my songs, and like. And then the week later, I got told by the owner not to do that.
Well, and I'm like, the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, and I'm like, it was that song's not in my set this week. Like, I did that last week because, like, to this day, I am all about rotating sets because to me it seems like crazy to like be that performer who performs the same like 1, 2, 3 songs. Over and over and over
again. Yeah.
And it's like
especially to people like, I don't know how this bar was that you were at, but like a lot of times like I'm keep using Boardwalk as like the reference, but like a lot of times, like granted South Florida is a very like transient area and there's a lot of like tourists and people constantly coming in.
Yeah.
A lot of the times at Boardwalk they're like regulars. So like if they see you doing like the same moves or like the same shit or the same songs like every week, to you as a performer, it starts to get redundant, but also to someone as like a spectator that goes to these bars and these like nightlife places often.
Right.
Like you said, you're just doing the same shit over again. Like you're going to make more money and be more profitable when they see you doing something different or doing something that's like out of your comfort zone to some capacity.
Yeah. So. And then like how I eventually like shifted to the gay bar. So at one point I was doing both, and I was doing both in the same night. So literally I was like opening one show. I did like my 15 minutes, got in my car, drove to the like next bar, and I did that for 5 months, and I'm like, one of these has got to go because like I can't. I was leaving my house at like 7 p.m. and then like not getting home till like 12:30 at night or 12:30 in the morning. And it's like,
well, that's like early though, and like I feel like in gay world, like if I'm going out to an appearance, I feel like I'm lucky if I'm like home before 3, and that's why it's also too much for me. I'm like, I can't do this with a regular job. Like it's so much energy and so much like
no. And then like as I said, I would go home at 12:30, and then I'd have to be up at 4 to get like eat breakfast and like get ready to be to work at 6 a.m. the next morning. So it's like, yeah.
Yep. Oh, I understand that very well. That's the biggest struggle I faced, and also why I'm like very selective about appearances, because I just know the way I am. I'm like, oh, I'm having fun. I'm out. Like, let's go to like an after party. And then it's like 5 a.m. and the sun's coming out, and it's like, fuck, I have to work in like 3 hours. And it's really, really hard. Like, it sounds dumb, but it's like hard juggling so many jobs at once. But you put yourself in those situations, but it's what you like doing, and it's how you're making money. You're meeting new friends. You're like hanging out with old friends, and it's tempting. It's like tempting, but it's fun.
But it was also the fact of like, you said like 3 a.m. The thing is like, Orlando is a city that like closes early.
Yeah.
Like you probably know because like every bar closes at like 2 a.m.
Yep. So it kind of puts like a little soft curfew on it. But I don't know if you're the same way, but like with me and my friends, it's like, hey, well, the bar closes at 2. Like, let's find someone's house to go to after. Let's find an after something. But if you have the self-control to not fall down that path, then it's a little easier.
See, I'm not like a party person. Like my thing is like the reason why I haven't gone out more is because like I found the last time I was in Miami because what happened was I was going out to Twist, but like I was like all of a sudden I was like getting ready, and then all of a sudden like how I usually like put, because I wear like bodysuits primarily when I like go out, so like I needed somewhere to like put my phone and everything. So I had like a small like backpack, and then I look on Twist website and they're like, we don't allow backpacks.
No backpacks.
I'm like,
right.
So I'm like, I had to de-drag, like get in the shower, like wash out my makeup and everything. Right, and then I went out to the bar in just like regular clothes, and I'm like, I don't like this.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, I'm trying to get better. It's not like some people are just bad at saying like no to things, and they always get like FOMO. To me, it's like not even that. I'm just the kind of person where like once I start, it's like hard for me to get me to stop. Like I can originally say no and be like, no, I'm not going out tonight. But once I'm like performing or like around people, then I just get very like, oh, let's keep going. Like it never stops.
Right.
But it's nice to like sometimes have those like hard curfews or like things set that like put limits on yourself, so you're not tempted to like keep going or like stay out until whatever time in the morning.
Yeah, that would.
It's hard. I'm trying to get better at it, especially as I get older. My body can't really take as much of it as I used to when I was like younger, but it's hard.
Because I heard actually, like you mentioned before, like Kyle was the person who told me like once you get to like 30, he said exhaustion like is worse than a hangover. So it's like
yes, yep.
So I'm like, maybe it's good that like, because there are some days, like as I said, like I've done long interviews. Like most of the time, I try to keep it like hour and a half, hour 40 tops. But like I had a drag queen who went 2 hours and 38 minutes. I'm like, sis. and that night I didn't get to bed till like 11, and then like I set my alarm for like 5 a.m. because like
at that point I make up an excuse like, oh, I'm sorry, I only allotted an hour and a half for this. I really have to go and feed my cat. It's like sorry, but this has been great. But it's true. Like exhaustion is, as you get older, it's very real.
Yeah,
I used to be able to go like on like these like trips that I go on, or like party weekends with friends. You're so used to like a party, like after hours, you get like 2 hours of sleep and you just go to the next one, and that's like normal. Now if I don't get at least like 5 hours of sleep a night, it's like you feel it the next like few days. Like it really is like very real, like how your body, like as you get older, just slowly starts to realize that it needs more rest and like natural relaxation.
Right. Crazy. So, what's your dating life been like?
So I like I said too, like I recently broke up with my boyfriend, and like we tried dating a little bit like long distance after I moved down here. So we like broke up officially in like April or May. So I've only been like totally single for 4 or 5 months. So I really haven't been in like a space where I've been like actively like pursuing dates, but I'm the kind of person with like dating in general. Like I'd much rather, I feel like dating and like boyfriends and relationships come when you least expect them to. Like if you're the kind of person who's like on Tinder, like asking around to go on dates all the time, like it just kind of feels like forced to me. You're probably not going to meet someone that's a little more organic and substantial. I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But like in those 4 months, I've like told myself like, look, you need some time to be single, like enjoy your life, like start working on like this new career that you've like given to yourself. But like, of course, like that's what it's been like, oh fuck, like I'm starting to like meet these people that like have now come into my life that I want to explore romantically because I'm not actively looking for them. And there's like a guy that on Gio's roster who like I was like really we're talking, not like dating, but since, with the exception of him, and like we're still like really good friends and still kind of like figuring out our relationship, for lack thereof. But with the exception of him, like I said, like since I'm not actively pursuing them, it would take a lot for me to like actually like date someone or be in the capacity to like allow someone in until I feel like I've checked off the box of like leaning into single hoe life a little bit.
Yeah.
And enjoying my life without the pressure of a relationship in it.
Right. So in terms of my dating life, it's pretty much currently non-existent.
Well, you said you were friends with benefits, so I feel like that had to have been like something at some point.
No, it's the thing. The thing is, as I said, that would like honestly form into a relationship if we both didn't have different goals. Like he's originally from California. He wants to stay in Florida. As I said, I've lived in Florida my whole life. I want to leave.
Mm-hmm. No, that's totally fair. Yeah, and I think I mean, maybe I don't know if like you have the same view, but it's funny as gay men. Like I feel like, I mean, for me personally, and every gay and every person is different, but I feel like now, just with the experiences I've had in my past and like where I am right now in the industry, I feel like I would never want a relationship that's closed, just because I feel like we all naturally kind of seek sexual interactions at some point that's not with your boyfriend, or at least that's how I am currently. To each their own. But I was going to say, like, it's weird because at least with my friends, I have certain friends who are like sisters, like they're just friends. I would never like touch them with a 10-foot pole because that's fucking weird.
Yeah.
And there are other friends that like, for whatever reason, it's just like okay and comfortable that like you can like explore things more sexually with them. And people are kind of like put into those two buckets.
Right.
Like, unintentionally, but just how it is. Like there's some friends that I'm like, they could be very attractive and so hot, but it's just like I could never have sex with you or like view like that because like you're my family. And other friends, it's like totally normal to be at like an orgy or something, and it's like, oh yeah, we can have sex together, and it's like normal and not a weird thing. But I don't know, like you're the same, but it's just like it's weird how like we kind of like put each other in like these buckets. Yeah, it's how my life has been.
And see, like my thing is you said like you couldn't imagine being in a close relationship. I could only imagine it with one person. It's actually, as I told someone, I leave like an air of mystery because somebody said like, because of course you probably know this from being on like Instagram and stuff. Whenever you put that, like people want to ask you a bunch of questions, and of course the question of my romantic life came up. I said, I didn't say who. I said, I have a crush on somebody. They've been on this podcast before. I'm not saying any more than that. Mm-hmm. So now, so now you got everybody thinking like,
who is it?
I had everybody thinking who is it. Somebody had like, oh my God, it's me. I'm thinking, sis, it ain't you.
Sit down, relax. Yeah. No, I mean, when you put yourself like in the public eye to any capacity, like of course people are gonna like kind of, they look to you as like a public persona. So it's not saying they don't recognize that like you don't have feelings or emotions, but like you're putting yourself out to a level of like vulnerability where people are going to want to know more about you or like ask questions. And then when you kind of tease at things like that, it's like, well, of course people are going to want to know more, or like assume that it's them, or like try to figure out the mystery. But it's just so funny. It's interesting. But it's also,
it's like, as I said, like my feeling is when people, and I don't think that should shock anybody, because it's like if you're sitting down with people and people are being like super, super vulnerable with you. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm only human. Like, I mean, it bounds war. I was going to develop feelings with somebody. Like,
it's interesting too. I mean, I think in it's hard because when you're like dating someone, I guess obviously everyone is looking for different things, and everyone has like different levels of attachment. Look for in a partner. And to me anyway, I'm like a very vulnerable person, and I'm not going to be interested in someone that can't like match those level of vulnerabilities. And if I feel like there's constantly these walls up and that I can't talk to you about anything like substantial beyond like black and white issues, like that's not interesting to me. But some people just don't have that level of like I don't want to say emotion, but they just don't have that care, and they're like happy with their relatively like vanilla relationship, and that's totally normal. But I feel like to most people, like they want to be able to feel like they can be themselves and be silly and open up and actually express emotion that's deeper than just a superficial relationship.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's most interesting and engaging to people. So it's like you said, like, of course, when you post something like that, everyone's going to be like, well, who is it? Is it me? It's totally me. But yeah, like when you're in a public eye in any capacity and you're putting podcasts out or you're dancing, you're on OnlyFans, of course, people are going to like look to you as like an outlet of, you know, trying to like figure out more, or like wanting to get to know someone to some capacity on a deeper level.
Right. So let's see, what was the thing I was going to say about this? Oh, I was going to tell like probably, okay, so as I said, like I haven't been in many relationships. I've only been in 2.
Mm-hmm.
So one lasted a year, and that was with somebody who like actually, as we broke up, they basically told me they were transitioning, and they were like they were taking hormones while they were living in my apartment and not telling me about it.
Hey, in gay world, a year-long relationship is basically like a marriage. Like if you're lasting a year, that's like you're basically like wedding bells are in the future. But yeah.
And then like as you said, like you should take time. I was young and stupid. I did not take time. So I got in a relationship with somebody immediately after that. And I was with them for a month.
Mm-hmm.
And as they were breaking up with me, so like as I said, I've primarily been with black guys. It's the one time I dated a white guy. Turned out they were racist. I'm like,
what? Of course. Of course.
And literally as he broke up with me, he said, all you ever want is that N-word dick. And I'm like,
that's just a jab at that point. Like at that point, like you're just like looking for like low blows and shit to say to like make it worse. You know what I mean? But yeah, you learn from your mistakes. You learn, that's how you learn what you like and what you don't like. Not being racist. I'm saying like you learn from your own mistakes about how to move forward and figure out like who you want to date.
I mean, it's like, it's not like it turned me off to dating white guys. I just haven't, as I said, I haven't wanted to. I don't know. As I said, it's like living at home. It's like when I want to date somebody, I want to be able to like bring them over to my apartment. Like, I don't want to like,
It's
have to,
yes, it's not just sex. Like you want to be with someone who like after you come, you're not like, get the fuck out, this is gross. Like someone who you're comfortable like being with, like, you know what I mean? It's not just like awkward and it's like, okay, I served my purpose. Like we got off, like get out the door. Like you want someone who you're comfortable around with all the time, but you're also still into them sexually as well. You have to have that balance.
That's my friends with benefits. That's why I was telling somebody, I'm like, we cuddle every time. And somebody's like, how do you do that with your friends with benefits? I'm like,
yeah, I get it. See,
they want to cuddle and kiss. Like, what do you mean? How do we do it? Like, it just happens organically. Like,
that's so interesting because to me, like it's so weird. It's like one of the guys I was talking to, I actually had this conversation with him. Like, to me, like cuddling and like kissing is more like intimate than like actually like fucking. Like I would rather see my boyfriend fuck someone else in front of my face, but then if I saw them like cuddling with someone else or like kissing them, like that would be like too much, and I would consider that to be, like, cheating. So like I don't know if I could like cuddle with my like friends after like fucking them, because that's where like that line is drawn of sexual versus like emotional. But I guess everyone views those boundaries and like who falls into those territories totally differently.
And it's not like well, as you pointed that out, it's like it's not like there aren't feelings there, and it's not like when I eventually move, it's not gonna be easy. Like,
no, that's fair. Yeah, I guess like it's different with different people too, and like what might be viewed as okay with like one person and like acceptable and comforting might be like different. It's like different rules with like different dynamics and different people.
Right.
But it's like it's weird because as a whole, like it's strange that in my mind, like I would literally rather see like my partner like fuck someone in front of my face, and I'd be like, yeah, it's fine, like have fun. But if I saw my partner like cuddling with someone, or they told me that they spent the night at like someone's house, that would cause like red flags in my mind and make me be like uncomfortable with that situation versus like literally like anal penetration.
Yeah.
But it's different levels of intimacy basically.
Right. So what's your relationship to drugs and alcohol?
I mean, I'm open about it. I mean, I actually went to jail for 4 months a couple of years ago because of I got like caught with drugs, and because of in Florida, like the amount of drugs that you have basically is what constitutes like trafficking or like possession. So because of the amount that I was caught with, even though I had no intent to like sell them, like honestly, like I got charged with like trafficking and intent to sell. So after that, like I definitely took like a hard pause for a while, because obviously going to jail and being arrested for something kind of makes you like evaluate things very differently. But I'm very like I'm a gay male in my 30s. Like I'm very open about the fact that like I love going out and having fun. So like my relationship to drugs, I guess, to answer that question, is I'm open. I mean, I have boundaries of like hard things that I would like never do, and which I kind of find to just be like a personal turn off. But I would say like recreationally, I enjoy going out and having fun. Alcohol, I've just like honestly never really been like a huge like drinker. Even when I was in college, like it was just not something. I hate hangovers. I just hate the feeling of being like drunk. It's just like never something that's enjoyable to me. So I guess like with substances in general, I'm kind of the mentality of like, hey, you do what you like, or like what you feel like is fun and enjoyable for you, as long as you don't cross any like boundaries or like get to a level where it's like unsafe for you or makes me feel unsafe or uncomfortable. Then it's like, you do you. I respect your beliefs and you respect mine. But like I said, like, yeah, there are definitely like boundaries and like certain drugs and things that I personally like don't find attractive, and always set limits for myself. Because as you know, it's like being in this industry, it's like very easy, and I don't want to say like comforting, but it's very easy to fall into like dangerous habits when you're around people and like around nightlife, where like these things are literally like, right in your face. But I would say that I have like in my mind like a healthy relationship with them, where I enjoy them recreationally, but there are certain boundaries that I set for myself to not let myself go into like an unsafe territory.
Right. So now to me, drugs.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what about you? I'm curious.
Never really like. Okay, so the only thing I've abused, like a quote unquote abuse, so like I have bone spurs in the heels of both of my feet. I got them from working a job where I was on my feet sometimes 12 hours a day. Luckily, don't work it anymore. So back before I had health insurance, because it takes so long to get health insurance. Again, fucking hate you, America.
Yes.
For 4 months, I was taking 18 to 24 ibuprofen a day.
Oh, that's a lot of like any drug. But there's so many health. Again, a side tangent, but there's so many like health things that you don't realize that taking ibuprofen regularly actually does to like fuck up like your blood and your body. Anyways, yes, that's a lot.
Yeah, I used to get sick all the time. Everyone's like, it's because you're taking so much ibuprofen. I'm like, but I have to, because it's like you have to. It's and then that's like the only thing. And then in terms of like alcohol, so I had a bad night where it's literally like I was performing down in Lantana at a bar that's it's actually not even open anymore. It's this place called Pennies at Duke. It used to be open like in Lantana. Okay. And it was a night where people were handing me drink after drink after drink after drink. I wasn't buying stuff for myself. And then I got in my car, and then I drove an hour home, and then I might have been like 50. I was almost home. Then I got pulled over by a cop. And luckily, as I say, my dad came and picked me up. Otherwise, I would have gotten a DUI.
Yeah, and that in itself is like a multitude of consequences. DUI is taken very seriously, but at least you had a point of like realization, it sounds like, I guess.
Yeah, so it's like now, in terms of drinking when I perform, I don't do it.
Good for you.
Because it's like
hard.
It's, first of all, like, as I always say, like the thing of where it's like being a singer, it's better for my voice to have water anyway.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's amazing. I mean, it's like I said, like, I think being in this industry, like nightlife, performing, OnlyFans, whatever, it's to me like very hard to do that like soberly, just because you're like putting yourself out there and being like very vulnerable. And I think a lot of times the mentality is, oh, they're drunk or like they're high or like whatever. And obviously it puts you in like an easier headspace and like your mentality is a little more relaxed when you're on some kind of substance.
Yeah.
But I have like so much respect for like performers and collaborators whenever they can just do that like totally soberly. And I hope I get to a point where that's eventually like something that I can say I do too. I don't think I use drugs or alcohol as like a crutch necessarily.
Right.
It's just so much easier to do these things when you're on some things. It just makes you more approachable and your guard gets let down a little bit.
Well, let me put it this way. One of the secrets is I say the sunglasses help. I can't see the audience really. Like, so that makes it a little bit easier too. When it's like,
yeah, definitely. It's like, it's like a party weekend. Like it's like a Sunday morning. You're like, why are you wearing sunglasses inside? And you're like, no reason. Just wanted to wear them.
Well, I mean, like, I don't go to this explanation with everybody. Like, clearly, that I mean, I'll just tell you the reason. So, like, these are my mom's, and like, as I said, she passed away when I was 18, so she never lived to see me perform. And it's like, in some ways, it's like she gets a chance to like be there spiritually, like with me every time I perform.
That's really nice. No, that's sweet. I get that totally. So it's like there is like a little bit of like a deeper meaning to like why you use them regularly.
Yeah, and it's like the other reason is, and I want to country drag queens because I've done this for so long. I literally don't know how to do eyes. Like, just because it's like obviously like why would I bother trying to do eyes if I know I'm literally going to cover them up? Like,
I mean, I think that's really sweet though. I mean, it's kind of nice and like endearing, like just this level of like respect for your mom. But it's like there's like actual like a more deep and like meaningful reason as to like why you dress a certain way or like as of like your entertainment persona. Like it's there's a reason behind it. It's like sweet.
Yeah. So okay, I got two more.
Okay.
Two more questions. Okay, so what are your thoughts on how the LGBT community is being treated today?
It's a very deep question. I mean, I think overall, I would say like, I don't know. See, this is another thing that I think is a little deeper than meets the eye, because obviously you see like all these crazy like political things like living in Florida, like DeSantis and all these crazy laws and bans that are like ridiculous. So this is a thing in 2023. But at the same time, it's like you see also happening like behind the scenes. We talked about like us like coming out, or at least like me like coming out, I was like 21. You see like these like 12 like 13-year-olds that are just so proud of being who they are and view sex like they're so comfortable. And it's like I'm not saying it's like political or like society is like telling them that's normal, but it's just there's a reason why I think being gay and like sex is so much more. It's just crazy to me, because like this new age of like kids and like the new youth, it's like I was talking to my friends the other day, like they're so much more comfortable like being who they are at the age of like 13 than I would ever be, like almost sometimes in my 30s.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't know if it's like double face where like it's nuts and sad that we're seeing all of these like laws and like crazy politicians and things that are happening to society that like it's embarrassing that are happening where we are. But then at the same time, you see like these like positive things happening, like I said, this like new age of like children and like youth that if they're doing this already at the age of like 12 and 13, then like imagine where they're going to be when they're our age. So it's like you have these negative things that are like crazy to see and like bring you down in such like a negative and disparity way. But then at the same time, you do kind of see these like glimmers of hope and like positive things happening, I think, in our community, especially, that still like gives you hope and makes you realize maybe it's not as like discouraging and disparaging as like some of these people on these like headlines that you see that try to like bring us down are also happening at the same time.
Right. And it's like,
it's, you know, it's like it sucks and it's like embarrassing, but you kind of like take the cons with the pros sometimes, and you still do see this evolution of like positivity and like a good things like coming out of like the evil and of the bad.
Right. And it's why like that's one of the reasons why I want to leave Florida, because it's like I see how things are going here, and it's like,
yeah,
well, not only that, like as you say, good thing you want to like you don't want to stay in Florida for the rest of your life, because I just want to point out something. Anyone who's like, Florida's going to be here forever. No, it's not. People are dumbasses. They're building things on top of things that they shouldn't. They're going to flood the whole state.
Correct. And that's going to happen in time just with the climate and, you know, however. So it's not going to be here forever. I don't know if it's going to be in our lifetime, but yes, it's a good point.
Oh, yeah. That's why, what was it? Just in this area, there used to be a road. The area I live in, they're like building it up for some reason. I have no idea why the fuck. I literally have no idea why the fuck anybody wants to move here. Like, but they're just like building it up, and now like there are roads that I used to be able to drive down all the time that are now underwater every time it rains because they're just building houses on top of.
Crazy, like just these residential areas here. When I first moved here, rain. You know how the rain is in Florida; it'll come out of nowhere. After like storming for like 30 minutes, you'll walk down the street and like the road will be like inches
underwater.
Where the
That's why I'm like, good luck. Anyway, so last question. So, what's the biggest misconception about you?
These are so many good questions. Ooh. So this is like interesting, but there's like two things that come to mind, which one is a little more cliche than not. I feel like just from like this 6 months, 5 months that I've been doing this, just because I'm like, thinking about it from the interview, I feel like my friends like kind of like judge me a little bit, and like even people that meet me now, they assume like, oh, you do OnlyFans or you do like you work in nightlife, like. The perception is like you must love sex or like you're super comfortable with yourself like sexually. And I feel like it's almost like just the opposite, because it makes, like I said, it makes you view sex in a totally different light. And just because someone pursues sex in any capacity for like money or for work, that doesn't suddenly make them this like sexual creature where their entire life is now revolved around sex. So that's the first thing. And the second thing I would say is, like I said, like in general, like I think I'm a very like social person, and my friends and people that know me kind of just assume I'm this always like outgoing, like bubbly, like happy, ready to go person. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like the opposite, where like I love my alone time and love being by myself, because sometimes the pressure of always bringing people together and being a happy, bubbly person, it becomes like the opposite effect, because you're always so worried about other people having a good time and what people like perceive about you, that you almost can't have fun out by yourself, because like you're always like thinking about making others happy and always being out there and active and happy, when at the end of the day it's like, no, like sometimes it's exhausting, and like all I want to do is sit by myself on like weekdays and like watch Netflix and not talk to like anybody for hours. So it's like, it's just, again, I think this mentality of like people like view you in some perception, but in reality, like at our core, and myself personally, we're almost like the opposite of what we perceive, like put ourselves out there to be in the limelight.
Right. And I will say, to me, certain people, I've heard people say this, certain people think I'm shady. I'm not. I'm blunt and honest. Like, I am the person who's like, if you ask me my opinion and I think you suck, I'm going to tell you you suck.
You suck.
Because like,
yeah.
No, or it's like, not even like indirectly, I've done it on here. Like, if I think somebody's whack, I'm going to say somebody's whack. Because it's like, why would you like want to tell somebody? Why would you like want to like be the person who's like, oh yeah, you're doing things that are so great, you're so amazing? It's like, I'm the person. Okay, like I'll just give one example. This is a part of me being shady. So it's like, so there's this rapper slash go-go dancer out in LA named Tokyo.
Okay.
And like, he makes all this music where it's like basically like him just like twerking. He's like, I'm twerking, sitting on a dick. And it's like you are like 30. You know, he's 30 years old. I'm like, you call yourself a rapper. I don't say every song's got to be substantive, but can you give one?
Have some depth or like some creative, like you're an artist, like show your artistry. Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, like I totally understand what you're saying, but I also think it's good to be honest and blunt and like be real and authentic. But at the same time, there's also a difference between being like blunt and being rude. Like you should be yourself and be honest, but it also means that at the end of the day, like who you're talking to or communicating with, like doesn't have feelings. So it's like, yeah, you should be authentic and like call people out if they deserve to be called out. But I'm also not going to be like blatantly be like an asshole or be like rude to someone if those lines are kind of like blurred a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Yeah. So I'll like kind of sandwich it in with a nice comment. I think Tokyo's an amazing go-go dancer. I'll just say that. Like, he's a great go-go dancer. I don't think he's a good rapper, but I think he's an amazing go-go dancer. So it's like, here's the thing, as you point out, like, as we said before, not everyone can do everything.
Correct. Pick your lane.
So it's like just because I'm one of those people who can like sing, rap, like write songs, like host a podcast, it's not like I'm doing stuff. I know what I'm doing. Like, I'm not like the person who's like I theoretically can act, but I'm not going to be like, go put me on a set.
Right, exactly. Again, it's like same thing. Yeah, same thing with OnlyFans. Like, just because you can doesn't mean
you should.
Correct. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Weird way to end it, but that's how I'm going to end it. Anyway, with that being said, it's a pleasure getting to meet you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is actually fun. I'm not usually much of like an interview type person, but it's actually fun. This was a good time.
And first of all, you told me off camera. He's like, Tanner told me off camera. He's like, how are we gonna go an hour and a half? I'm like,
fuck yeah. This was great.
Yeah. But anyway, so like, as I said, I'll end stream, kind of like take all this off because I like that's my favorite part. To like breathe.
Oh yeah, I'm excited to go and like eat food.
Right. So anyway, with that being said, this is Gay Out the City. I'm your host, Prince Electro Diamond, and I hope you've enjoyed.